Welcome back to the Unashamed Truth podcast. I'm your host, Grant Castleberry, where we equip you to stand with biblical clarity and bold conviction. And I have to begin this podcast by giving a short apology because I've been hearing from so many of you and you're asking, where's the podcast? Why haven't you recorded a podcast recently? And part of that is because I led a UTM trip to Greece. And so I was out of the country for 10 days. And then I came back and I went to Louisville and defended, and by God's grace, successfully passed the defense of my dissertation on Martin Lloyd-Jones. So I'll be talking more about that in the coming days. I want to tell you about just some of the takeaways that I've learned from Lloyd-Jones and why he is so applicable to the modern church today. But on today's episode, I am so excited and grateful to be joined by my favorite guest that I could possibly have, my wife, GraceAnna Castleberry. And one of the things I want to do is probably once every month or once every couple months, bring her on the podcast and for us to talk about issues that are related to the family, related to marriage, related to parenting, and how to think about those things from a biblical worldview, from a biblical perspective. And she's been so much a part of Unashamed Truth from the very beginning since 2022. She's writing a column on motherhood in every issue of Logic on Fire. So she's been really right at the center of this ministry from the beginning. So it's just so great to have you here on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Grant.
So one of the things the reason why I want to do this and bring her on and talk about the family and talk about parenting is because I think the issue of the family is so critically important today. I've been thinking a lot about the passing of John MacArthur, Vodi Bakum, James Dobson, Charlie Kirk. And one of the things that all four of those men had in common was an emphasis upon the importance of the Christian family. And if we're going to be successful as Christians in this culture, we must not lose our children. And I was reminded of several verses I just wanted to open up the podcast reading to you. This is Deuteronomy 4:9. Only take care and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. Now listen to this. Make them known to your children and your children's children. Really profound words that the works of God that we've experienced in our own lives and hearts should be kept diligently, but moreover, passed on to our children and our children's children, our own grandchildren. And then, of course, a page over, this is well known, the Shema in Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. So it's really a picture of a biblical, comprehensive education in the home, that the mother, the father are to be raising the children to know the Lord, to fear the Lord, to know the Lord's commands. It's to be really just a comprehensive education in the home. It's when you lie down, when you rise up, when you're sitting down. It's not just, hey, we have family devotions. Those are important, but it's all the time. We are to be teaching our children while we're driving places, while we're going to the grocery store, while we're working on schoolwork, while we're in the car going to church, while we're sitting in the pew at church. We're always to be taking advantage of the opportunities to teach our children. I know you spend more time with the children than I do. How would you say that this fleshes out in our home?
Well, first, Grant, I love that you started with that passage because I think so often, especially for those of us who are in ministry, maybe your husband has a ministry position or maybe he's a pastor. But Grant, you're so busy leading and guiding and teaching the sheep in our flock. But something that's always been such a priority for Grant and I is that our children are our first and primary ministry, and we never ever want to lose that. We never want to lose the joy in our home and the focus of our hearts on the Lord and passing that down to our children. And that second passage that you read has really been something that's been in so many ways a manual for me as a mother because first, I love that it says in verse 6 that these things must be on your heart first. And so I know that as a mother, the most important thing that I can do for my family is to be in the Word of God, to be sitting under sound doctrine so that that leads to sound living in my life. And then taking advantage of all the ordinary moments. It doesn't matter how many years go by. It really is most of the time the unexpected moments with our kids that sometimes have the biggest impact. And so I think leaning into those moments, making time for them and desiring to be with them too. You know, it takes so much patience to be a parent. And so sometimes there can be that desire to get through something or to get them to bed or to, get them home or get them fed, but really leaning into those moments and all the little in-betweens.
Such an important point that you brought it up. It's right there in the Shema that you love the Lord with all your heart first, and that you obey these commands from the heart, that it's something that's a part of your life. And I think one of the testimonies that I hear so often as a pastor from so many Christians, so many people that maybe grew up even in a quote Christian home, is that their parents claim to know Christ, but their Christian walk wasn't really modeled in the home. And that can be so detrimental to children, where you are saying, do one thing, but then you are modeling another thing. And so it's so important that we love Christ in the heart, that we love the Lord first with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then we are calling our children to take part in the life that we are living. You know, as Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. So that example is so important. And I think that's why Paul says, and I want to read these verses and then continue to talk about teaching children in the home. But this is from 1 Corinthians 7:13 and 14, really profound verses. Paul says, if any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. And really interesting, Paul uses this word hagios, speaking of holiness, and I don't think he means saved here, but I think he means that the Christian spouse, whether it be the husband or the wife, has a sanctifying role that they play within a marriage and within a family, whereas the children that are underneath just one Christian father or mother, Paul calls holy. And that speaks to the holiness of the life of that Christian parent, that there is an example of godliness, an example of Christian teaching. That Christian parent is teaching the children the truth of God's word. And so there's a sense where that is the blessing of God on any family, to have one Christian parent. And then you think a family like ours, we're blessed. Both of us are still alive. Both of us are believers. Our children are blessed with not one, but two Christian parents. So don't underestimate how God is going to use you, how God is going to use, Lord willing, your husband or your wife to impact your children. Paul says with just one Christian father or mother, the children are sanctified, set apart. So God, the Holy Spirit, is and will use you in your children's lives. But we want to be intentional about that. And that's something that you and I have talked so much about, just intentionality and trying to teach the truth of Christianity to our children, but in a way that is joyful, in a way that's compelling, in a way that's enthusiastic and fun. And so a few years ago, we were really thinking about, okay, what are our Christmas traditions? And we read the Luke story every year. That was something that we do. We used to do the big Snoopy lights, the Charlie Brown lights. We really have kind of gotten away from those.
You like those?
I do like those. I do like I don't know how good they actually look, but I do like those, kind of a Castleberry tradition. But we were searching for a tradition of our own, and you kind of stumbled upon one just in a moment. So why don't you explain how you came up with one of our family traditions?
Well, I think it kind of goes back, Grant, to that Deuteronomy 6 passage you were talking about, taking advantage of the moments, because Manger and Danger, which we're going to talk about today, wasn't something that I officially planned out, but more something that just happened in the regular, ordinary moments of life. And it kind of came out of a devotional I had been doing with the kids that year that traced from Genesis all the way to Jesus and talked about, since the beginning of time, God has always had a plan for redemption. And Satan has always hated that. And he's always tried to thwart God's plans. But one of the things that I've been teaching the kids through God's word is that God's plans cannot be stopped. And no matter how dark the days may seem, Satan can never win. He can never win. And so they had been learning that in their devotionals. And it was end of November, beginning of December, and my girls asked me if I would buy Elf on the Shelf. And I don't have anything against Elf on the Shelf for families that use that as their tradition. I really don't. But because it wasn't a tradition I had grown up doing, you had grown up doing, it really kind of gave me pause of, is this something that we should do as a family? And so I remember, pulling it up on the computer, looking at it, reading about the game and the tradition. Of course, I'd seen it, but I wasn't super familiar with it. And I kind of had a light bulb moment where I thought, this is pretty simple what they've done here. So I think I am going to take the manger, I'm going to borrow it from our nativity, and I'm going to hide it somewhere in the house for the kids to find in the morning. And so that's what I did. I borrowed the nativity, I hid it in our house, and when the kids got up that morning, I said, guys, I have a special game for you. Remember how you asked me to buy Elf on the Shelf? And they were like, yes, yes, yes. I said, well, I have something even better. I have hidden the manger downstairs for you to find, and the manger is in danger. And I kind of took that phrase from that Bible lesson that I had been teaching them. And specifically, I had taught them about how after baby Jesus was born, King Herod wanted so desperately to kill Jesus that he had ordered a decree for babies ages 2 and under to be killed. And of course, at the time, the kids were just devastated to hear that, because Patrick was little and they just couldn't believe that something so wicked could happen. So it really impacted them. But I wanted them to know, that's the true biblical story of what had happened. And so anyway, that kind of came, the manger's in danger, and where that phrase came from. So I hid it. And of course the kids went insane, running around the house trying to find the manger. And immediately after they found it, they asked me if when Dad got home from work, if he could hide it. And so when Grant got home, he joined in on the fun, and you hid it. And then of course it was the next night, Mom, hide the manger. And I think you actually hid it the next night. And I remember you hid it on the chandelier. And so it kind of organically became a tradition.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think, something that's so important, and you said that you taught our children, even our young children, the story about Herod killing the infants in Bethlehem. that you were teaching the children the truth of the Christmas story and how that came about. And I think that's important to bring up because I think around Christmas time, it's not that we're against Santa. It's not that, like you said, it's not that, we're against elves or, anything like that. I think sometimes that those things are fun and there's a place for those things. But we really do want to be about the truth. And we want the truth of the incarnation. This is the most wonderful, amazing reality in our universe that the eternal Son of God took on our humanity, took on human flesh. It's just amazing to think about that he came into the world. And because of that, we have hope. And getting that truth to children through a game just really was transformational for our family. And about a couple years later, we were on a podcast and we were being interviewed. And the question was, what are your Christmas traditions? So why don't you talk about that and how the game came to be published?
Yes, we naturally just shared about the game, and a publisher, 316 Publishing, listened to that podcast and reached out to us about publishing Manger and Danger. And I think one of the things that I love the most about this is that, Grant, you were so intentional about writing these devotionals for children. We talked about when we were doing this, should I write them? Should you write them? And I just remember saying, Grant, I want you to do it because I was thinking about Christmas time and fathers gathering their children around them and engaging with them and telling them the Christmas story. And so that's what I love so much more than the manger is what you wrote for children. It is so impactful. I love them. I've read every single one. And I think what you did so well was you articulated these stories from a father's heart to your children. And I think that's what's really special about this is that we were able to do this while our children are the ages that they are, because we know what it's like to have a rambunctious, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, a 2-year-old who's running around, a, 10-year-old who's listening, a 14-year-old who's picking up on a lot. And so I think God's used that, in these devotionals for them to really minister to families. But I also really love that it's not just a father's heart, but you wrote these as a pastor. And so you have that theological bent, but you did it in a way that explains it to children. And that's one of the things that, having you, as my husband, as our kids' dad, so often after dinner when you're leading the children in devotionals, I often think our children are so blessed to have this. And I want more families to have that. We know so many families, the husband comes to know the Lord later in life, or you're just looking for resources. And so I think that's what's so special about this is that these devotionals are simple and yet they're deep and they're also fun.
So why don't you explain how the devotion works with the game? So a family gets Manger and Danger. How do they use the devotions? Because they're somewhat different from the actual hiding of the manger. So how do they go together?
So the wonderful thing about this is you can make it how it fits best for your family. So there have been days where we've done the game and I've read the devotional to the kids in the morning because they were all home. But most of the time we've done the devotionals in the evening over supper. We do a lot at the dinner table because food kind of keeps kids in one place, typically.
Yes, it does.
So we do a lot at the dinner table where we'll be kind of finishing up our meal and some kids will still be eating. And that's a time where we have a little bookshelf next to our kitchen table and we'll pull it off. And that's a great time that we do it. But it only takes, a few minutes to read through the devotional and then we talk through the questions as a family. But we've also done it in the living room too.
Yeah. Let me add on to what you just said, because I think a really important point that Paul in Ephesians 6 gives the imperative to fathers to raise the children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, to teach the children. And of course, mothers are under the headship of the husband. They are to partner with that, but ultimately that responsibility is to the father, and that's a command that for a Christian father to fulfill. And the way that I wrote these devotionals, this is the book right here, Manger and Danger, that goes with the game. And really, I just love the illustrations and how they really illustrated it well for kids to just kind of captures the wonder of the story. But I wrote it so that a Christian father or mother can open it up. And this is, I'm going to show you all day one here, but this is day one of the devotion. And there's a picture on one side and the devotion on the other. And there's some discussion questions. And all the parent has to do is literally read the title, the verse, the devotion, and the discussion questions. And by the way, the point isn't just to read it verbatim and call it a day, but the point is to actively engage the children. And if they stop and ask questions, that's totally fine. If it looks like, a kid's being rambunctious, they're probably, maybe still listening, but this doesn't always look picture perfect. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to read this first one just so you can get a taste for what these devotions are like. And like GraceAnna said, what we try to do is begin in Genesis and go all the way through the Old Testament, through the Gospels, and then all the way to Revelation, telling the story of Christ coming, being promised to come as the Messiah, him coming, and then ultimately him even coming again. But here's the first one. It's called The Gospel in Genesis. Genesis 3:15, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. You might not realize it, but the story of the manger and the baby Jesus actually begins in Genesis, the book of beginnings. Genesis teaches that God created everything. He formed the world in 6 normal days. The most special of all of God's creation was Adam and Eve, the only creatures made in his image. Yahweh, the one true God, created them to love, worship, and obey him. Sadly, Eve disobeyed Yahweh and listened to Satan, eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that God had said not to eat from. Then she gave some to Adam, her husband, who disobeyed God on purpose. This was the first sin, which means breaking God's law. And since they sinned, they brought the curse of death on all of humanity. In Yahweh's goodness, he did not leave them without hope. Yahweh gave a promise, sometimes called the first gospel. The promise was that a son of the woman would come who would bruise or crush the head of Satan. In the process, Satan would bruise his heel. Jesus fulfills God's first gospel promise. He is the Son of Man who came from heaven and was born in a manger. He came to die on the cross and crush Satan's power. By dying on the cross, Jesus defeated sin and death forever. Even though Adam and Eve's sin brought death into the world, God promised that his Son would bring his people into a loving relationship with him forever. The story of Jesus and the manger goes all the way back to the beginning, to Genesis. And then here's some of the discussion questions. Did you ever realize that the story of the manger actually started in the book of Genesis? Why or why not? 2, what does it mean for the son of the woman to bruise or crush the head of Satan? 3, why was it necessary for the son of Eve to be bruised? And why is that good news for us? So oftentimes the discussion doesn't end there. The discussion goes on with further questions and insights and sometimes tangents, right? I mean, sometimes it's just totally off kilter tangents about something that a kid said at school, often about evolution or creation or or something. But it's amazing. And that's what you want. You want people, your children, to be interested in these spiritual realities, and for them to know that you care, and for them to be bringing these questions and conversations to you. So,
and one of the things, Grant, that I love that you do when we're doing those discussion questions is typically we go around the table, and Grant, you'll ask them each the same question. And, a lot of times we start with the younger ones so that they don't steal the answers of the more mature children. And sometimes too, we'll make up different questions if we feel like maybe they weren't listening, or you want to pull something, but they always know you're going to ask those questions. And so I think it does make them want to listen even more. But I like that you do that, where you ask each one, and something that I think is really sweet that you do is you always encourage them. Obviously, we've had the occasional kid who gives an answer because they're, being goofy, and we have to correct that because they're not listening. But usually you encourage them, even if it's something so simple, in an answer, you'll say, Patrick, great job. I love that you pointed that out. And I think it makes it a very warm, encouraging time together. So
yeah, and we have fun, and maybe promise a little dessert afterwards if they listen well. But okay, so if a family wants to get Manger in Danger, where can they go to get it?
Unashamed Truth, 316 Publishing, and Amazon.
Yeah, so I think those are the only three places right now: Unashamed Truth, 316 Publishing, and Amazon. And the first devotion begins December 1. So if you can, you're going to want to get your hands on it before December 1. Obviously, if you get it later, that's fine. You can, we're going to be doing some devotions that we missed last year.
Because I think that's the reality too and if you have children, you know how this goes. December's busy, and you may miss a day, or you may miss a couple days, but you can just pick back up at whatever day it is. If it's December 15th, pick up with day 15. They're all standalone. And then, this book is made to pull out every year. And something that I think is neat is, we talked about this a lot last year because we were publishing it last year. And I even thought, I hope the kids don't get sick of it because we've talked about it so much. And they had to do a promo video for it in the middle of July. But Charles said to me, a couple weeks ago, Mom, we're not going to forget to do Manger in Danger this year, are we? And I just thought that was so neat that they love it still. And we really hope and pray that this will be a wonderful tradition for your family.
Yeah, I can't wait to start again this year.
I'm excited. I actually enjoy looking for it too. Yeah. Because you hide it sometimes.
Yeah.
And do the hot, cold thing. And then I think also it's neat that you often, when you go to work, you have me send you videos of the kids searching for it if you were the one that hid it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do like to hide it in tough places. And, the reason I like to bring you on here, I want to bring you on here more in the future, is because I think you just bring so many insights into family life that parents and families are desperately looking for and needing. And we want to share more about what it's like to be a pastor's family. Our kids are, 14 to 2. And so we're facing a broad spectrum of challenges in terms of parenting teenagers, parenting little kids, all at the same time in a busy home. And so just really looking forward to, to having you on again and just talking about what it's like being a pastor's wife, mother of 5, and ways that we can serve some of the families that are listening. But thank you so much for coming on, GraceAnna.
Thank you, Grant.
Well, thank you for tuning in to the Unashamed Truth podcast. And we're going to be recording some more in the coming days. So stay tuned, and looking forward to catching you next time. If you haven't already, please subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and we'll see you soon.